Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! A stifling humidity clung to the air, a weight as oppressive as the memories that haunted combat medic Brian Mitchell. His eyes, shadowed from bearing witness to countless agonies, remained hollow as he navigated back to his quarters after another grueling shift in the medical tent.
"How many, man?"
A voice pierced through the stifling air as he trudged forward.
4. 2 didn't make it,
replied Brian, his voice vacant, devoid of hope. He directed this message to Lieutenant Rodriguez, whose path crossed his at that moment. Their exchanged gaze conveyed a harrowing understanding, a bond forged in the crucible of shared trauma. The night enveloped the base camp, blotting out the light. Brian slipped into his private quarters, a cherished privacy allotted to the medical team. His trembling hands betrayed the calm exterior he maintained for others. The shaking had started 2 months into his tour and worsened with each passing week. Inside his footlocker, beneath regulation equipment and personal effects, lay a carefully folded bundle wrapped in water-resistant canvas. Brian's heartbeat quickened as he withdrew it, setting it gently on his cot. For a moment, he simply stared at it, contemplating whether tonight would be one of those nights. The screams of the wounded echoed in his mind. Permission enough.
"Just to get through,"
he whispered to himself, a mantra repeated on too many evenings to count. The bundle unfurled to reveal a creation of repurposed white parachute silk. Brian had traded 3 cartons of cigarettes for the damaged chute, claiming he needed extra material for medical purposes. In the quiet of night, his skilled hands, the same that stitched wounds and stabilized the dying, had transformed the silk into something beautiful, something healing. Brian slipped off his boots and uniform, methodically folding each piece. From a small metal box, he removed the camouflage face paint he had modified for a different purpose. Setting up his small shaving mirror, he applied the green base to neutralize the redness in his face, then the lighter beige to soften his features. With a sliver of red grease paint typically used for marking maps, he carefully traced his lips. The transformation continued as he pulled the silken white blouse over his head. The olive skirt followed, fashioned from a pair of repurposed fatigues, cut and resewn to fall just below the knee. From beneath his cot, he retrieved a small box containing the auburn wig he'd purchased during a brief leave in Saigon. The seller had asked no questions, only named a price. As the wig settled into place, the auburn waves framing his face, Brian Mitchell faded away. In his place stood Athena, named for the goddess of wisdom and warfare, a duality that felt fitting in this place of chaos and death. Athena studied her reflection in the small mirror. The face that looked back seemed more at peace than Brian's had been in months. Her fingers traced the contours of her face, feeling the tension drain from her shoulders. "Still here," she whispered to herself. "Still fighting." This ritual had begun 3 months ago, after a particularly devastating day when a mortar attack had left Brian working for 16 straight hours, losing 7 men under his care. That night, the tremors had been so bad he couldn't hold his canteen. The first creation, a simple wrap dress from parachute silk, had been an impulse, a desperate grasp for something. Anything that could distance him from the horror. What had started as mere distraction had become salvation. When Athena emerged, the tremors subsided. The nightmares, while not gone, lost their chokehold on his sleep. For precious hours, the weight of Brian's responsibility could be set aside. Athena settled on her cot, legs tucked beneath her, and opened the dog-eared copy of The Great Gatsby she'd read a dozen times. In these moments, she could pretend the war was a distant thing. Tomorrow, Brian would return to duty, steady hands saving lives, professional demeanor intact. But tonight, Athena breathed. The attack came without warning. The first explosion shook the foundations of Athena's quarters, sending the mirror crashing to the floor. She bolted upright, the book tumbling from her lap as the air raid siren began its mournful wail. "All medical personnel report immediately!" The announcement crackled through the camp's PA system, barely audible over the chaos erupting outside. There was no time. No time to change, no time to remove the wig or the makeup. The second explosion hit closer, and the decision was made in a heartbeat. Athena grabbed her medical bag and ran into the night, the white blouse and olive skirt moving with her as she sprinted toward the infirmary. Flames illuminated the camp, casting everything in a hellish glow. Men shouted orders, ran for cover, manned defensive positions. "Mitchell, over here!" Captain Reynolds waved frantically from beside a fallen soldier. If he noticed Athena's appearance, the urgency of the situation superseded any reaction. Athena fell to her knees beside the wounded man, muscle memory taking over as she assessed the damage. Shrapnel had torn through his abdomen, blood pooling beneath him. "Pressure here," she instructed Reynolds, guiding his hands to the wound. "Keep it steady." More explosions, more wounded. Athena moved from one to another, auburn hair coming loose from its pins, face smudged with dirt and blood, but determined. The silk blouse became stained with evidence of her work, yet her hands remained steady, steadier than they'd been in months. "We need to move these men to the bunker!" she shouted over the continuing bombardment. "This position is too exposed!" When no one immediately responded, Athena took charge. "4 men! Carry stretchers! Everyone who can walk helps someone who can't! Move in groups of 6, 30 seconds apart!" To her surprise, they obeyed without question. Perhaps it was her tone of command, perhaps the surreal circumstances, or perhaps simply that in moments of crisis, competence outweighed all other considerations. Athena led the first group, half carrying a sergeant with a leg wound. They weaved through debris and flames, making it to the reinforced medical bunker as another round of explosions rocked the perimeter. Inside, Athena continued working. The makeshift operating room filled with casualties, and she moved from table to table, stabilizing, treating, reassuring. If the other medics or doctors wondered about her appearance, they asked nothing. Results were all that mattered. "Mitchell." Major Harris, the chief medical officer, appeared at her side as she finished stitching a chest wound.
"Never seen you work this steadily before."
Athena merely nodded, moving to the next patient.
"Don't know what's different tonight,"
Harris continued, helping to apply a pressure bandage.
"But whatever it is, keep it up. You're saving lives."
The attack lasted 3 hours. By dawn, the Viet Cong forces had withdrawn, leaving destruction in their wake. 17 wounded had passed through Athena's hands during the night. All 17 still drew breath as the sun rose. Exhausted, covered in blood and grime, she finally stepped outside the bunker. The camp lay in partial ruins around her. Men worked to extinguish remaining fires, secure the perimeter, and assess damage. In the harsh light of morning, Athena suddenly became acutely aware of her appearance. The auburn wig remained, though disheveled, The white blouse and olive skirt were nearly unrecognizable beneath layers of dirt and blood. Whatever makeup had been on her face had long since been sweated away or smudged beyond recognition. Several soldiers glanced her way, confusion evident. Some quickly looked away. Others stared openly. Athena straightened her shoulders and continued walking, each step deliberate, headed back toward her quarters. "Mitchell!" Colonel Hargreaves stood blocking her path. The base commander's face was unreadable as he took in Athena's appearance. "Sir." She saluted, voice steady despite the turmoil within. "I'm told you organized the evacuation of the wounded, that you worked without break through the night, that every patient you touched survived." "Just doing my duty, sir." The colonel studied her for a long moment. "Report to my office at 1600 hours. "Yes, sir." Athena maintained her composure as the colonel walked away, though inside, Brian's panic threatened to surface. Court-martial? Dishonorable discharge? The possibilities lined up like targets at a firing range. She continued to her quarters, closing the door behind her, and finally allowing herself to sink to the floor. The tremors returned with a vengeance, her body shaking with exhaustion, adrenaline crash, and fear. Yet, beneath the fear lay something unexpected. Pride. Athena had faced combat conditions, had taken command, had saved lives, had done all this without hiding, without shame. In that moment, sitting on the floor of a small room in Vietnam, Athena made a decision. If this was to be the end of her military career, she would face it with the same courage she had shown on the battlefield. The afternoon arrived too quickly. Athena had cleaned herself up, but made a choice that surprised even her. The auburn wig remained, styled as neatly as possible with limited resources. She wore her dress uniform, but had rapidly altered it, taking in the waist, adjusting the cut to better suit a female form. The result wasn't perfect, but it was deliberate. At precisely 1600 hours, she knocked on the colonel's door. "Enter." Colonel Hargreaves sat behind his desk, accompanied by Major Harris and Captain Reynolds. All three men looked up as Athena entered and saluted. "Mitchell," Hargreaves began, "or do you prefer another name?" The question caught her off guard. "Athena, sir. Like this, I'm Athena." The colonel nodded slowly. "Athena, Greek goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare. Appropriate." An uncomfortable silence filled the room before Hargreaves continued. "I've spent the day collecting reports about last night. By all accounts, your actions were extraordinary. 17 lives saved directly by your hands. Another 30 who might have been lost if not for your organization of the evacuation." He shuffled papers on his desk. "In 20 years of military service, I've never encountered a situation quite like this one." "Sir, if I may," Athena began. "You may not. Not yet." The colonel held up his hand. "This is uncharted territory for all of us. Military regulations are clear regarding dress code and conduct. What's less clear is how to respond when those regulations conflict with extraordinary service and bravery." He stood, walking to the window. "Major Harris tells me you've been one of our most effective medics, though lately he's noticed signs of combat stress. Tremors, insomnia, the usual suspects." "Yes, sir. And these symptoms, they're reduced when you're Athena?" "They disappear almost entirely, sir." The colonel turned back to face her. "I have 2 choices here, as I see it. I can enforce regulations to the letter, losing an exceptional combat medic and sending a message that personal well-being is secondary to conformity. Or I can recognize that the goal of regulations is to maintain an effective fighting force, and sometimes that requires flexibility. Athena stood perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. Captain Reynolds has put you in for a silver star. I've approved it. The words hung in the air, seemingly impossible. The ceremony will be held next week. I'm curious. Will Brian or Athena be accepting this honor? The question wasn't mocking. Something in the colonel's tone suggested he genuinely wanted to know. Athena saved those men, sir. I believe she should be the one recognized. Hargreaves nodded slowly. Then we have some details to work out. Word spread through the camp like wildfire. At first, it manifested as sidelong glances and whispered conversations that stopped when Athena approached. She continued her duties, now openly as Athena, her auburn hair neatly styled, her uniform modified with the colonel's tacit approval. The third day after the attack, Master Sergeant Willis approached her in the mess hall. The hardened veteran set his tray down opposite her, at an otherwise empty table. Mind if I join you? Please. Athena gestured to the seat, bracing for whatever might come next. Willis studied her face for a moment. You stopped the bleeding in my leg last year, after that ambush near the river. I remember. Thought I was done for. Willis poked at his food.
Doc Mitchell saved my life that day.
Athena waited, unsure where this was leading. I got 3 kids back home. Youngest was born 2 months before I shipped out. Willis finally looked up from his tray. Just wanted to say, Mitchell, Athena, whatever you call yourself, you're all right in my book. He extended his hand across the table. After a moment's hesitation, Athena shook it. Thank you, Sergeant. Willis nodded and returned to his meal. They ate in comfortable silence, but something had shifted. By evening, 2 more soldiers had made similar approaches. By the next day, the whispers had largely stopped. Not everyone approved, of course. Athena received her share of slurs and open hostility from some quarters. Lieutenant Parker made a point of loudly questioning her mental stability whenever they crossed paths. Yet for each Parker, there seemed to be a Willis, someone whose respect was earned through competence and courage rather than conformity. Colonel Hargreaves had arranged for a proper female dress uniform to be delivered from Saigon. When Athena tried it on 3 days before the ceremony, the fit was imperfect, but the significance overwhelming. She stood before her small mirror, auburn hair framing a face that showed both vulnerability and determination, the blue uniform with its female cut making visible what had long existed inside. A knock at her door interrupted the moment. "Come in," she called, expecting perhaps the colonel's adjutant with details about the ceremony. Instead, Nurse Lieutenant Carol Winters entered, carrying a small case. "I heard about the ceremony," Carol said without preamble. "Thought you might want some help with makeup. That camo paint might work in a pinch, but you deserve better for receiving a silver star." Athena blinked in surprise. She and Carol had worked together often, but had never been particularly close. Thank you." Carol set down her case and opened it to reveal a modest but comprehensive collection of cosmetics.
It's not easy being a woman in this man's army. Figured you could use an ally who understands at least part of that struggle.
As Carol helped her apply proper foundation, eyeshadow, and lipstick, Athena found herself sharing truths she'd never spoken aloud. How Brian had always felt at odds with expectations, how Athena had emerged not as a costume, but as an authentic expression, how the line between the two had blurred until Brian seemed more the disguise than Athena. "I don't know what happens after Vietnam," Athena admitted as Carol added the finishing touches. "I can't imagine the Army will let this continue back in the States." "One battle at a time," Carol replied, stepping back to assess her work. "That's how we all get through this place, and you've already won more than most." The day of the ceremony arrived clear and hot. The entire camp assembled in formation, with Colonel Hargreaves and Visiting General Wesley presiding. Athena stood at attention in her blue dress uniform, auburn hair neatly pinned according to female regulation standards, makeup subtle but present. She could feel hundreds of eyes upon her, some supportive, some hostile, many simply curious. General Wesley had been briefed on the unique circumstances, but still did a double take when Athena stepped forward. To his credit, he recovered quickly and proceeded with the ceremony as planned.
Combat Medic Specialist Athena Mitchell,
he read from the citation, the brief hesitation before her name, the only indication of his adjustment. Distinguished herself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty while serving with the medical detachment during the attack on Firebase Delta. The general continued reading the account of that night, the evacuation Athena had organized, the 17 lives saved directly by her hands, the leadership shown under fire. As the words washed over her, Athena stood tall, her gaze fixed on the distance, her hands steady at her sides. In keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflecting great credit upon herself and the United States Army, the silver star was pinned to her chest. Athena saluted sharply, met the general's eyes without flinching, and returned to her position in formation. Later, at the small reception that followed, General Wesley approached her privately.
"I've seen a lot in my 30 years of service, Mitchell. Never seen anything quite like this."
He gestured vaguely at her appearance.
"No, sir. I imagine not. Colonel Hargreaves speaks highly of your service record."
"I've tried to do my duty, sir." The general nodded thoughtfully.
"The Army isn't ready for this. You understand that?" "Yes, sir. But ready or not, things change. They always do."
Wesley sipped his drink.
"When your tour ends, come see me at Walter Reed. I'm heading a new program on combat stress. Could use someone with your unique perspective."
Before Athena could respond, the general moved on, leaving her to consider possibilities that had seemed unimaginable just weeks before. The remaining months of Athena's tour passed with a strange new normalcy. She continued her medical duties, now permanently as Athena. Her auburn hair became a familiar sight around the camp, often the first thing wounded soldiers saw as they were brought in for treatment. To some, it became a symbol of hope. If you saw the auburn-haired medic, your chances of making it home just improved dramatically. Colonel Hargreaves handled the administrative complexities with remarkable discretion. Officially, Combat Medic Specialist Brian Mitchell was still on the rolls. Unofficially, everyone knew that Athena was the one who showed up for duty each day. The colonel created a protected space through the force of his authority and the respect he commanded, allowing Athena to serve without the full weight of military bureaucracy descending upon her. When orders finally came for her return to the States, Athena faced them with mixed emotions. Vietnam had been hell in countless ways, yet it had also been the place where she had found the courage to become herself. On her final evening, a small group gathered to see her off. Captain Reynolds, Major Harris, Nurse Winters, Master Sergeant Willis, and a dozen others who had worked alongside her through blood and fire.
"You changed things here?"
Willis said, His normally gruff voice softened.
Not just for yourself.
How do you mean? Athena asked.
Made some of us think differently about what courage looks like.
Willis shrugged, uncomfortable with sentiment.
About who belongs in this man's army.
Major Harris added,
I've put in a formal report about your case. Medical documentation of how your transition correlated with improved performance under stress. It won't change policy overnight, but it's a start.
Athena looked around at these people who had become a strange kind of family. I couldn't have done any of this without your support.
You did the hard part, Carol said, touching Athena's arm.
We just didn't stand in your way. Colonel Hargreaves arrived late to the gathering, pulling Athena aside for a private word.
I've spoken with General Wesley, he said without preamble. Your position at Walter Reed is confirmed. It won't be easy. You'll be under scrutiny that has nothing to do with your medical skills, but the door is open.
Thank you, sir, for everything. Hargreaves nodded, uncharacteristic emotion flickering across his face.
In 30 years, when the Army finally figures this out, remember you were there first. Remember you showed the way.
The following morning, Athena boarded the transport plane that would begin her journey home. She wore her female dress blues, auburn hair neatly styled, silver star displayed on her chest. As the plane lifted off, carrying her away from the jungles and the combat and the place where she had finally become herself, Athena Mitchell looked toward the future, uncertain, challenging, but undeniably hers.
Walter Reed, Army Medical Center, 1972.
Athena moved through the hospital corridors with practiced efficiency, white coat over her uniform, auburn hair now grown long and styled in a practical bun. 3 years had passed since her return from Vietnam, each day a careful navigation between her role in General Wesley's combat stress program and the institutional resistance to her very existence.
Dr. Mitchell.
A young private with a 1,000-yard stare looked up from his hospital bed as she entered.
Thought you might not make it today.
Wouldn't miss our session, Private Cooper. Athena sat beside his bed, opening his file.
How are the nightmares?
Still there.
But not every night now.
They talked for an hour, about Vietnam, about the things he'd seen, about the person he was trying to become after war had changed him. Athena listened more than she spoke, recognizing in his struggle echoes of her own. Later, in her small office, she reviewed her notes on Cooper and 5 other veterans under her care. A knock at the door interrupted her concentration.
Come in.
General Wesley entered, closing the door behind him.
Athena, got a minute?
Of course, sir. She set aside her files. Wesley settled into the chair across from her desk, studying her face.
The Pentagon Review Board has made their decision about your case.
Athena felt her heartbeat quicken, but kept her expression neutral. For months, a special committee had been evaluating her continued service, the first formal review of whether someone like her could remain in uniform.
I see. It wasn't unanimous.
Wesley's tone gave away nothing.
3 voted for immediate discharge. 4 voted to create a special exemption based on your service record and the documented therapeutic effects of your situation.
Athena waited, hardly breathing. You can stay, Athena, with conditions. Wesley handed her a folder.
You'll be restricted to this program. No combat deployments. No command positions. Annual reviews of your status.
She accepted the folder with steady hands. It's more than I expected, sir.
It's less than you deserve.
Wesley stood.
But it's a first step. What you did in Vietnam. Not just the lives you saved that night, but the way you've lived since. It matters. Maybe not to everyone yet, but to enough of us. After the general left, Athena sat alone with the document that represented both victory and compromise. She was still officially listed as Brian Mitchell in some Army records, still subject to restrictions and scrutiny that others didn't face, still navigating a path no one had walked before. Yet she remained in uniform, remained able to help others who, like herself, had been transformed by war. The small photograph on her desk caught her eye. Athena, in her dress blues, auburn hair shining in Vietnam sun, silver star gleaming, standing tall amid a group of soldiers and medical staff from Firebase Delta. They had called it courage then. Perhaps it still was. The Pentagon, 2016. The auditorium buzzed with conversation as military personnel of all ranks found their seats. At the podium, General Catherine Reynolds, daughter of the now deceased Captain Reynolds from Firebase Delta, adjusted her notes and nodded to her aide. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention?" The room quieted as the general began speaking. "Today, we announce the formal implementation of Directive 1325.07, establishing comprehensive guidelines for transgender service members in the United States Armed Forces. This directive ensures that qualified transgender individuals can serve openly, receive appropriate medical care, and be treated with the dignity and respect they deserve." General Reynolds paused, looking toward the front row. "This moment has been decades in the making. While many have contributed to this progress, I want to acknowledge one person whose courage paved the way. In 1969, during the Vietnam War, a combat medic made history by serving openly as her authentic self at a time when such an act required extraordinary bravery." From the front row, a woman in her 70s rose slowly to her feet. Her dress uniform, updated through the years but still recognizably Army, bore the insignia of a full colonel. Her auburn hair, now streaked with silver but still vibrant, was styled in an elegant twist. Colonel Athena Mitchell's Silver Star citation speaks of her valor under fire. What it doesn't fully capture is the battle she fought every day afterward. A battle for recognition, for dignity, for the right to serve as herself. Her 47 years of continuous service represent not just personal courage, but a living testament to the values our military aspires to uphold. The audience rose in a standing ovation as Colonel Mitchell made her way to the podium. At 72, she moved more slowly than she once had, but her posture remained military straight, her gaze clear and direct. "Thank you, General Reynolds." Athena's voice carried through the room without need of the microphone. "I accept this recognition not for myself alone, but for every service member who has had to choose between authenticity and duty, a choice no one should have to make." She looked out over the gathered officers and officials, seeing not just them, but the faces of those long gone. Colonel Hargreaves, Major Harris, Carol Winters, Sergeant Willis, all those who had stood with her when standing with her wasn't easy. "In Vietnam, I learned that courage comes in many forms. Sometimes it's charging into enemy fire. Sometimes it's simply being who you are, especially when who you are challenges others to expand their understanding of service and sacrifice." Athena touched the silver star that still adorned her uniform, the medal that had marked the beginning of her journey. "To the transgender service members who will benefit from this directive, past, present, and future, I say this: you belong in this uniform. Your courage honors its legacy, and your service makes our military stronger, more compassionate, and more complete." As applause filled the auditorium once more, Colonel Athena Mitchell
stood tall at the podium, auburn hair catching the light, a living bridge between a night of bravery in a distant jungle and a future where such courage would no longer need to be extraordinary.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!